concept of representative concentration pathways pops up quite frequently in climate change discussions. So this module is briefly going to describe and explain what a representative concentration pathway is. A representative concentration pathway is a greenhouse gas emissions pathway, and we'll start by looking at the GHG pathway we've been on since 1990. The vertical axis shows greenhouse gas emissions in billions of tons of CO2 per year, and the horizontal axis is time. You can see that CO2 emissions were increasing at about 1.1% per year through the 90s, and this ramped up to about 3.3% during the 2000s. It's backed off somewhat during the current decade, but it is still increasing. Once the numbers are crunched, it's expected that about 37 billion tons of CO2 were released during 2017. This Venn diagram shows the historical emissions in black and a wide range of possible future emissions pathways. Most of the uncertainty around where the climate is headed in the coming decades is not, as you might think, associated with climate models, but is linked with which emissions pathway we follow. These potential emission scenarios are grouped into 4 representative concentration pathways, or RCPs: RCP 2.6, RCP 4.5, RCP 6, and RCP 8.5. So what does RCP mean? RCP stands for Representative Concentration Pathway, and it's a projection of future greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere. Each RCP is based on a specific global greenhouse gas emissions scenario. The number in RCP, for example RCP 4.5, represents the additional forcing in watts per square meter due to the additional greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. In order to make things a bit less complicated, the average pathway of the different RCP groups is shown here with the approximate increase in global temperature for each. The pathway in blue corresponds with the Paris Agreement goals that would limit global warming to below about 2 degrees Celsius. This is the RCP 2.6 pathway. Note that this would require large-scale technologies that would start removing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere by about 2070. A less aggressive emissions pathway is shown in yellow that would limit global warming to about 2.5 degrees above pre-industrial temperatures. This is RCP 4.5. If all countries are able to achieve the targets that they have made for the Paris Agreement, global warming would be limited to about 3 degrees Celsius. This corresponds to RCP 6. Note that the collective goals are significantly more aggressive in emissions reductions than the sum of individual country pledges. And finally, the business as usual pathway in red will result in temperatures at or above 4 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial temperatures. This is RCP 8.5. It is important to consider worst-case scenarios in any planning process, and RCP 8.5 cannot be ruled out given the current geopolitical climate. For the purposes of climate projections for Alberta, models based on the strong mitigation scenario, or RCP 4.5, and the business as usual scenario, RCP 8.5, will be considered. The temperature changes associated with the different RCP scenarios are in the 2 degree to the 4 degree range, which doesn't seem like a lot of change. However, this is where Earth history can provide some perspective. On the left, we're looking at a view from the North Pole down onto the Earth 18,000 years ago during the height of the last glaciation. You can see there was a continuous ice sheet from the southern Ural Mountains in Russia into the Midwestern United States. On the right, we're looking at the same view from the North Pole during our current interglacial period. And the change in global temperature associated with this transition from the full ice age conditions 18,000 years ago to the current interglacial period is in the 4 to 5 degrees Celsius range. So when we're talking about temperature changes globally of 2 to 4 degrees Celsius, it may not seem like a lot, but in terms of what happens on the surface of the planet, it is significant. This concludes module number 5 of Climate Change in Alberta, Unpacking RCPs.